Petersen from Skyline Animal Hospital in Idaho Falls, and I'd like to spend a few minutes and talk about parasites in dogs nationwide, but also here in the Idaho Falls area. Okay, there's 4 internal parasites for us to be concerned about nationwide, but definitely here in Idaho Falls, some of these as well. The first one we'll talk about is here, which is heartworm disease. Heartworm disease is a national problem. It's a national epidemic. Dogs, hundreds of thousands of dogs get it every single year. Hundreds of thousands of dogs die from it every single year. Here in the Idaho Falls area, we really don't have heartworm disease. We don't have much of it, but you don't have to go very far to get into areas that do have it. So Boise, Ogden, Salt Lake, all 3 of those areas have a dozen cases a year, and so they have heartworm disease that's there. So if there's, particularly if you're doing any traveling into Utah or Boise or really anywhere else, heartworm disease is something that we need to take into consideration. The other 3 that we're talking about here, roundworms, hookworms, and whipworms. And these 3 are actually intestinal parasites. And unlike heartworm disease, are doing great. They're alive and well here in the Idaho Falls area. Definitely doing great in the Northwest. These are pretty common to be. They're pretty common. As many as 1 in 5 to 1 in 6 dogs locally here in the Northwest is carrying at least one of these 3 parasites. And part of the problem is that often, even with adult healthy dogs who'll be carrying these things, doesn't necessarily cause a problem with them in that they're not vomiting, they don't have weight loss, they don't have diarrhea. But they can cause all of those problems, particularly in puppies. But the next thing is they actually then, if they're carrying them, can cause a problem. They threaten other dogs, obviously, and they can also threaten humans. One of these, even this roundworm, this one right up here, which we'll talk about, that's kind of the scariest of the 3, but that one, a dog can carry one single roundworm for up to 10 years without detection, without us knowing that there's a problem, and every single day they're pumping out eggs from this roundworm to threaten dogs and threaten humans. So, hookworms, this is the first one that we'll talk about as far as concern with humans goes, and the potential for humans to become infected with these. Hookworms are the reason that in the South you don't go outside barefoot, that you wear, if you're in Tennessee or something, you're wearing flip-flops, you're wearing shoes when you go outside, because hookworms live in the soil, and as you are walking barefoot, if one of these can stick through the bottom of your foot and crawl up through the skin of your legs. It happens far more in the South than it happens here in the Northwest, and definitely here in the Idaho Falls area, which is good. At the same time, maybe 10% of dogs locally are carrying hookworms, and so the potential's there, and I don't want it in my backyard. I want to be able to walk around in my backyard barefoot. Roundworms, this is the other one. This is actually the scarier. As gross as the hookworms are as causing these problems, roundworms can cause more serious problems in humans. So the way that a human becomes infected with roundworms is if just by playing with a dog, okay? So petting them and loving them, wrestling around with them in the backyard. Particularly, it's important to know that roundworms actually pose the largest threat to small children, so 2 to 10 years old, because they have that type of relationship with the dog. They're often hugging them and rolling around with them. They also don't have the best hygiene, so as we forget, having played with the dog, if we forget to wash our hands and we eat something, then we're potentially ingesting some of these roundworms. So roundworms, what do? They can cause all sorts of less major problems. They can get into the liver, the kidneys, the heart, the brain. Now those sound like big scary things, but the body usually deals with those. So most of the problems with roundworms aren't that big of a deal. But if the roundworm larva makes it to the back of the eye, it can destroy the retina and cause a blindness. There's a guy that we have a very good client whose neighbor grew up in Georgia, at 4 years old, went blind in one eye, and now he's got kids of his own, 38 years old, 39-year-old guy, has been blind ever since. So we don't run into it that often, thank heavens, or you'd hear about this on the news or something like that. But we do run into it. 2 years ago there was a case in Park City, Tremont, Idaho had a case a couple of months later, so something we run into. We had a caseworker. I had a caseworker here as a client who worked in the ER at Ermac, and she told me that probably 3 or 4 or 5 times a year a child will come into the emergency room with some problems associated with roundworms. So it's definitely something that we're dealing with here as well. Now, based on the fact that heartworm disease is such a big deal, these are pretty common here, these intestinal parasites, and they can also cause a problem. They can cause problems with humans. The AVMA, the American Veterinary Medical Association, actually recommends that every dog in this country be dewormed once a month, year-round. Now, we wholeheartedly support that, and I just recommend to you to spend a little time, talk to your veterinarian, and see what they recommend and how to pull that off.